Take two, because I forgot to turn on the mic. Alright everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be discussing how Sig Sauer was just found liable by a jury in Georgia, and we're going to get into all the details. Alright? This article, so I had to scour the internet, found tons of articles with a bunch of information. Unfortunately, the articles obviously are written and they're biased. So I dug around and actually found the actual original court case, and we're going to go over that and the findings. I know a few channels have already covered it. Most of these articles were written like 2 days ago, and I wanted to kind of let the dust settle once the initial information came out, because everyone's trying to be, first out the gate, and then not all the information is actually accurate. Plus, I'm busy, so there's that. All right, let's get into it. So, a Georgia jury has found that the New Hampshire-based gunmaker Sig Sauer is liable for a negligent discharge. Right? Yes and no. So we'll get into that. All right? So on June 20th, jurors in an Atlanta federal court found unanimously on all accounts that Robert Lang of Roswell, Georgia, after deliberating for only 9 hours, concluded that not only Sig Sauer has a defective design for the P320, but the company also failed to provide adequate warnings to consumers about the risks of unintended shootings. Hey, I know you're watching the video and I'm now interrupting it with this, but real quick, I just want to say the best way to support the channel is give this video a like if you're watching it. Please subscribe to the channel. Hit up the comments. It really helps the algorithm, and I really do love doing engagements with you guys. We have locals, we've got Patreon, but honestly, the most fun way, the best way to help support the channel is down in the description below. Click on the merch link. Go buy yourself some merch. The best-selling shirt everybody seems to love is Guns and Ammo, because America runs on Guns and Ammo. And thanks to people like you, I've been able to link the merch store now somewhere down at the bottom here, so you'll see a bunch of shirts for sale, which you click on one of those, it'll lead you into the portal where there's tons of designs for you, but I've pinned the more popular shirts, such as Guns and Ammo, Don't Be a Loot Drop, Communists Aren't People, which is what I'm wearing today, because communists aren't people. And if you don't get that, it is from the Civil Rights Act of 1964, where they laid out the civil right for people. And at the very end, they said, except communists, because they're basically not people. So communists aren't people. There you go. Get your shirts, support the channel, and I'll see you guys out there. All right, back to the video. So, to give you guys a little more backstory, yes, the plaintiff in this name is Robert Lang, and he shot himself in the thigh with his P320. So, there's that. All right, now I'm sure a lot of you have heard over the years about a lot of these negligent discharges and all this, that, and the other thing. Okay, so let's set the ground rules. You got to look at the raw numbers. So the P320 is the second most popular handgun in the United States. First being the Glock 19. I have both as EDCs. Now, am I worried about my P320? No, not particularly. So, there you go. I've had zero issues with it thus far. And watch now. Murphy's Law and all. Going through all the articles, even in this court case, they admit freely that there have been 100 or so negligent discharges where the gun spontaneously goes off. a lot of those have come back as operator error, basically, right? Because people put their little booger hooks on the bang switch. So, not Sig's problem. That's more of a people problem, a FUD problem, right? Because 99% of these people that have that negligent discharge, I swear to God, they look like the epitome of a FUD. One of those discharges actually was here in Connecticut at one of our local police departments, where an officer was wrestling a suspect in the lobby to the ground, and his 320 went off, right? And the department's like, oh, no, we dumped the 320 after that, we're going back to the Glocks. All right, well, they tried to blame Sig. The problem was the 320 was not properly stored in the holster. The trigger was not properly covered by the holster because it wasn't fully seated. The hood was not up over said pistol. The officer also shoved a foreign object that he had in his hand, could be keys, I don't know, up into the holster to free his hands up so he could deal with the suspect. So you have a gun that's not fully seated in its holster, you shove a foreign object in there, and then your gun just goes off. That is not Sig's problem, that is a you problem. But I digress, okay? In this particular case, it is reported by the Trace and the Washington Post that they investigated, revealing more than 100 people allege their P320s have fired without being having the trigger pulled, and at least 80 people have been injured, and there are numerous lawsuits going on. Okay, so there you go. A lot of the suits are still pending. A few have been settled outside of court. There's not much information on it because of NDAs and all that stuff. All right, so let me give you a little history on Mr. Lang himself. So he was carrying the most up-to-date version of the P320 pistol. Now, they don't get into which variant of the P320 it was. Was it a P320C, a P320F, an XD? Was it Legion? It doesn't say. It just says a P320. So we're just going to assume it's a stock P320. All right. I have a P320C, more compact, versus the full size. So, okay, he was carrying the most up-to-date version of the P320 that was released from the company after modification of the design in 2017. All right, so what was the modification of the design? Well, it's simple. When the 320 originally came out, we all know that it had issues when dropped. Please don't drop your guns. Sig found out it's pretty simple. The trigger itself was too heavy. So when the firearm hit, the trigger continued to travel, thus making the gun go off. All right, I mean, that's what they had said. So they did a voluntary recall, which cost them millions of dollars. This included the M18, the M17, civilian version, so on and so forth. Everybody had to send their guns back in, and they swapped out your trigger package. They went with a lighter trigger. So if the firearm had been inadvertently dropped, the trigger wasn't heavy enough to continue to travel. So 2017, all 320s manufactured from that point on, like the one I have this new trigger assembly in it, new trigger package. All right, so we identified that he had that P320 that was new. When he attempted to remove it from the holster that was in his belt after returning home from work one night in December of 2018, Lang loosened his belt and reached for the weapon's grip. That's when he says it fired, still fully secured in the holster, with his finger flat against the holster's belt clip, away from the trigger. Now, I want to know what kind of holster. The information I could find throughout all these articles that I was reading did not list what type of holster. I'm like, okay, well, was it a Bravo concealment? Was it a Safari Land? Was it just a piece of crap, you know, leather holster. I don't know. So I had to go to the original lawsuit, which was filed October 11th, 2021. And I had to read a couple of pages. All right. And in the summary nature of the action, subsection 9, it says, after researching which handgun to purchase, Mr. Lang was convinced that Sig Sauer was an elite designer and manufacturer of firearms. I would say yes, they are. They are top of the line, quality material. In March of 2018, he bought a P320. Serial number, I'm not giving you guys a serial number. It's in the court documents. That information, you guys, for me, it really doesn't matter. Along with the gun, he also purchased an inside the waistband, or IWB, full retention holster. More specifically, the black point, right hand, dual point, Sig Sauer P320 holster. The full retention holster was intended as an added safety measure with the body of the gun and trigger completely covered when the weapon was holstered. Now listen, if you're buying any holster where your trigger is not fully covered, then you've got serious mental issues. I want the trigger completely covered. I do not want foreign objects going up in there, inadvertently pulling the trigger while I have that gun on me. So I looked up the black point, right hand, dual point, Sig Sauer P320 holster. I'm going to put a photo right here. Now, granted, it is a picture of a Glock, but you get the gist of the idea. When I went through their website, clicking on all the buttons, even saying, hey, I want a Sig for a P320, it still had the image of the Glock. So you can see how that is. All right? There's that. Now, Sig released a statement through his spokesperson referring to the verdict and strongly disagreeing with it and saying that they're going to appeal, which, hey, I mean, that's just what you got to do sometimes. So not only did they say, yes, Sig is liable, you built basically a faulty firearm, you're also liable for like $2.3 million to pay to Lang for pain, anguish, suffering, etc. All right? And I'll get to more of this, what it says here. Let's see. Now, on a side note, a bunch of the articles talked about how guns are the only products that are exempt from federal consumer product safety regulations. Despite the dangers posed by a malfunctioning firearm, no federal agency can investigate alleged defects or impose recalls on models that are found to pose a safety hazard. I beg to differ. The government can totally investigate into firearms that are malfunctioning a lot, that are inherently dangerous. They can force these companies to handle it, to take care of it. And saying that they can't, I think, is false, because the government can't. Lang's verdict does not require Sig Sauer to recall the P320 or to modify its design or to inform the public of the potential safety risks. Now we're going to get into exactly what they found was liable. All right? So, real quick. Here is my P320. Okay? There is no mag in it. Completely empty. And I don't use the type of holster he does. I tend to use Bravo concealment. Alright. This, as you watch me try to put it in, is the in the waistband holster. Alright, so you have the little clips, and this sits. Now, I personally do not like to appendix carry, nor did Mr. Lang. He was carrying on his back at his 4 o'clock position, and when this went off, the round basically went through his thigh and popped out right above the knee. Ouch. Worst of all, his spouse, his wife was home, and their 2-year-old child when all this went down. That is sketchy to me, okay? So, you can see by the Bravo concealment holster that the part that's up against my body, the whole frame and everything's covered. And then on the side facing away from my body, the trigger area is all covered. All right? Now this is not even a level 1 retention, which when you look at, you can hear it click in. It's in there. It is sturdy, but it is not even level 1. Okay, level 1 would have some sort of hood, or it's like a Sherpa holster where you've got a little trigger button you have to disengage, which I'm not a fan of. Mainly because I'm worried about things getting behind that and the gun getting stuck. But the other thing is sometimes when people depress that and they pull out, all right, their finger doesn't end up here. As they pull in a rush, their finger slips right into the trigger, you know, and adrenaline's going off, and then boom, it goes off. All right? No bueno. I'm not a big fan of those types of holsters. If I'm getting into my level 1 retention, then I'm going to with like a Safari Land. Just so everybody knows. Okay? Less ways of getting the gun stuck in the holster. So all you guys out there buying those Black Hawks with their Sherpa, you might want to think about that. Once you start rolling around in the dirt and all that, the gun can easily get wedged up in there. Okay. So getting back to what the jury found. So during the testing of Lang's pistol ahead of the trial, it showed that it only took 4.5 pounds of pressure on the gun's trigger to cause it to fire, well under the 6 pounds of pressure promised to the consumer in the gun's manual. The trigger only needed to move 1/6 of an inch, which is about the width of 5 credit cards. So what they're talking about is so again, clear. They're not talking about this motion right here. They're talking about once it's depressed and you're on that wall, how far does it have to travel to make the gun go bang? All right? Not that much. But you still have to get past all this smushiness to get to the wall to have it go off. Okay? The trigger only needed to move 1/6 of an inch. Okay? And they say 5 credit cards before discharging. In contrast, the trigger on a Glock must travel more than twice as far during testing for the trial. All right? Now, I was not going to unload my Glock 19 and all that because I need to at least have something up and loaded. So I grabbed a 43X, all right? Because they said Glock, they didn't say what kind of Glock. And we're going to ghost that trigger together, all right? So you can see here. So I'm at the wall. I've taken out all the slack. Yes, you can clearly tell from the wall there it takes a little more pressure and it travels a little bit more than what the 320 does. Yeah. All right. So my thing with that, it's not a defect. I like the trigger on the P320. I like it because it is, the best way to describe it is it's soft. So once you're at the wall, once you break the wall, it's a nice, soft release. Unlike the Glock that I just did, It's more of a harsh release. So you have to really pull on it. This, the 43X, that particular gun, has a trigger pull of about 7 pounds. The P320 is a lot less. They're saying 4.5 pounds. There are some variants. Even when you buy a Glock, they're going to tell you that it's somewhere between 5 and 8 pounds, 5, 7 pounds, something like that. It's easier just to call it 6. Okay, 6 pounds. They're saying that the P320 was only 4.5 pounds. I don't know. I don't know if he did anything to his trigger, because you can buy a new trigger package for your P320. We're going to assume that it's stock. What exactly is my P320? Couldn't tell you. I've never tested it. But we can do that, so I will be right back.
12 seconds later.
Alright, so I've got a trigger gauge here. It is from Liable Products. You can buy these online. There's nothing super special about it. And it's just going to measure the pounds. Alright, so again, here's the 320. It is empty. Alright, that is on the trigger. And I'm going to start to pull. Did not give me a good reading. Here we go. All right, let's try it again. All right, so 6.8. Let's try it again. Throw it out. Has a bum reading. Didn't like it. There you go. Yeah, 6.1. This is the only thing, you have to keep resetting it. All right, clear, ready. All right, I probably overpulled it. That says 7.8. All right, that went down to 5.8. .5. I know it's kind of excessive. Now, I want to try and average it. I'm getting an average of 6. So, that's me. I don't know what to tell you. Mine averaged out to 6. It's a stock factory trigger. All of my guns are. I am not into redoing my triggers, things like that. I'm usually just everything stock triggers. But for precision shots, things like that, I want to kind of have an idea of what the trigger pull is on that. So, if you're into that kind of thing, I have it just to double check it. All right. Jurors concluded that Sig Sauer was liable for length shooting because, here we go, this is what they're guilty of. It had not designed the P320 with a special trigger safety like the ones used on Glocks and many other guns. That's it, right there. That's what Sig did wrong. They did not have a trigger safety. Now, for all of you who aren't aware of what I'm talking about, you can see right there, it is a completely smooth trigger. There is no trigger safety. On the Glocks, I'm going to move it over here so you can see it a little better. Right here, there is a trigger safety. Okay, right there. That needs to be overcome by touching the trigger, and then you're able to depress the trigger. So if you don't depress the trigger safety, the trigger won't unlock. All right. That's it. Sig, you didn't put a safety in your trigger. That's what you're guilty of. Okay, well, one of the original designs incorporated that in the handgun, and then Sig opted not to go with it once all their initial testing was done without it. They just kept it that way. If you're interested in a gun that has trigger safeties, buy those. If you don't want a trigger safety, then you have options. Right? So that's the only thing they're found guilty of. No trigger safety. That's it. That's what was defective. They actually described the firearm. I got to find the right verbiage. The jury agreed that the weapon is defective and dangerous because it doesn't have that trigger safety. Well, you know how they're trying to ban guns that are unique and or dangerous? That's what the ATF's trying to do. Well, under those rules, they could say, hey, look, a jury in a federal court found that the P320 is dangerous. We're going to regulate those, or we're going to ban them, or what have you. So that's the game they want to play, just so you know. All right, through additional testimony, it focused on inconsistencies around Sig Sauer's description of the P320's mechanism for firing. In product catalogs and brochures dating all the way back to 2015, and later disposition testimony, Sig Sauer has said the P320 employs what's called a double-action firing mechanism. Double-action guns work like bow and arrow, and it just goes on to describe it. All right? Many firearms experts consider double-action guns safer than single-action guns. This is handgun 101. A double-action gun, the trigger does two things. It cocks the hammer and releases the hammer. Single action releases the hammer. Well, the P320 has no hammer, nor does a Glock. They are striker fired. All right? So, there's that. Let's see, what else? They also say that single actions are less, or double action are less liable in discharging unintentionally. The most famous single action trigger I know is on a Colt 1911. It has a manual safety along with a backstrap safety. The firearm is extremely safe. All right. Sean Toner, who designed the P320, said, though he has testified previously in lawsuits the P320 is a double action, he now agrees that it's more accurately described as a single action pistol. Okay. I teach this in my basic courses. Glocks are categorized as a double action trigger. All right? It is, but it's not. This is what I mean. So a double action trigger will, like I said, not only cock the hammer, but release the hammer. This does not have a hammer. So it would pull back the striker and release the striker. All right? Some firearms, like the Taurus G3C, is marketed as having a restrike feature. Well, all that is every time you pull the trigger, it pulls back the striker and lets it go. That's a true double action. Glock, when you pull the trigger, it obviously releases the firing pin. Well, guess what? It's a dead trigger because the gun did not cycle. Once it cycles, your trigger will work again. It cycles, and you're able to do the reset. P320. It went, and the trigger is now dead. So it's acting more like a single action, even though it's categorized as a double action. They're making it sound like, well, Sig, they're kind of lying to you. Listen, they all do it. Any striker fire, if that's how it functions, outside of like the Taurus, which has the restrike feature, once you pull the trigger, if the firearm does not cycle, the trigger is done. It is kaput. It doesn't work anymore. The firearm must cycle. All right? They're making it sound like Sig screwed everything up and they're lying to us. They're not. All right? Now, in this particular article that I have, I pulled this one just because using the jury's decision to hold gun manufacturer Sig Sauer accountable for its defective pistol has renewed urgency to pass a Firearm Safety Act, said Representative Robin Kelly, a Democrat who represents Northern Illinois, including parts of Chicago. It is absurd that the CPSC Northeast can regulate. Sorry, it is absurd that the CPSC can regulate teddy bears, but not guns. Oh, look at that! Government wanting to regulate more gun stuff, like it never ends. We already have the ATF, and they regulate stuff, and they overstep their boundaries, and this, that. I'm pretty sure that CPSC would have zero hesitation in making it a living hell for firearm owners. A Democratic Representative, Debbie Dingell of Michigan, said she's going to continue to push her Defective Firearms Protection Act, which also aims to bring firearms under the CPSC's purview. All right. Robert Zimmerman, one of the attorneys representing Lang, is currently litigating lawsuits on behalf of more than 60 plaintiffs who accuse Sig Sauer of defectively designing a P320. All right, this guy's notorious for his lawsuits against Sig. And people say, well, that's because Sig built a defective gun that just goes off on its own. So, maybe it is just a Sig problem, but it's really not. So I just did a quick Google search. Not of a P320 negligent discharge. But I Googled for Glocks that just go off. And they're out there. It happens. It can happen to any firearm. All right? Usually, like I said, it's operator error. All right? So there you go. It's not just a SIG thing. It's just the nature of the beast. That's why we must use vigilance. Always point it in a safe direction. Don't point at anything you don't intend to destroy. All that stuff. All right? These rules are there for a good reason. Again, it usually boils down to operator error. Because, you know, after something bad happens, you're going to be like, no, I followed all the rules. Yes, I did. Not my fault. It's Sig's fault. You don't want to admit that you got, you know, lackadaisical and you maybe trying to get the holster out, you accidentally pulled your trigger. So that's one of the things he was talking about, is trying to get this out of his belt. He loosens his belt, and he grabbed one of these to lift up, and the gun just went off. I don't know how that would work because there's no jostling going on. Anytime I use in the waistband holsters, I literally grab both tabs, I pull, ease the gun up just a hair to clear my belt, let the tabs go, and then I grab the whole unit. I kind of angle the muzzle away from body parts, and I pull it out of my pants, all right? Because I don't like carrying appendix. I prefer a 3 o'clock. But there are times when it just makes sense to carry appendix, okay? Just because it's a little bit quicker. For me, if it's later in the evening and I'm running out to the gas station to go grab gas in my truck or something like that, it's just easier just to slide one of these holsters, one of these Bravo concealment holsters, right into my belt, abdomen carry, and just go. Okay, I'm not comfortable with muzzles of any type of gun pointing at my femoral artery or my thigh or the family jewels. Just don't like it. So, you know, some guys out there, they're just too fluffy to do that. I like 3 o'clock. It's what I'm used to. It's how I train. I don't train as much doing appendix. Alright, so that's pretty much all I have for you guys today. I know it was kind of a long-winded video, but it is later in the afternoon, and today is the first presidential debate for this 2024 season. So I'm going to make popcorn, maybe grab a little something to drink, and I am definitely going to watch that debate. I don't know how it's going to go, but I'm sure either way it's probably going to be a shit show. So do me a favor. Now that I've informed you about this liability lawsuit, do your own research. Don't believe everybody. Don't believe everything that you hear. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Let me know if you have a P320, if you carry the P320, if you're rethinking it because of the way this court case came out. We'll have a dialogue. We'll discuss. All right. I'll see you guys in the next video.